Well, hello, and welcome back to the Radio Gamescast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan, and I'm joined by my lovely duo of co-hosts, Alex and Wyatt.
I have a face again! I have a face
to the land of the
again!
living. It's wonderful.
What have we done? What have we done?
Look, we didn't do a normal episode last week because there was a lot of industry stuff going on that wasn't super fun. So, it was more fun to play a goofy video game, which we did, and you can go watch that, and it's a great time. Now, it's time for us to talk about something that maybe isn't as fun, in that this is the episode that we've been wanting to do. I think this idea has sat in our topics for, I think, years. And it's always just been like, there hasn't been a great time to tackle this topic. But with the recent announcement that Anthem is sunsetting, I don't think there's a better time to talk about the death of games.
The recent announcement that Anthem is sunsetting, and also the Stop Killing Games initiative.
Yeah, the Stop Killing Games lined up
passing.
at the same time, which I do want to talk about a bit. And actually, that's probably a good spot to open up. Stop Killing Games, as of the recording of this podcast, I believe is just about to end. The petition, it hit its signature goals for everything. I think they've gotten as many as possible, and I can actually
It is
just go check
currently
the live
in
numbers.
overdrive. Numbers
Yeah,
at
yeah.
about 1.3 million.
Great. Yeah, hit its target signatures. It's gotten some support from a few politicians, though I think nothing super central field for the EU, so nothing that's like part of the major political parties. Which I
Is
think is
also crucial. Oh,
yeah, it's the next step for it. For people unfamiliar with Stop Killing Games, it's in a petition going around in the EU, and in Britain, I believe, has its own version of this
I
as well.
believe there might also be a separate one for Australia, but
Yeah, distinctly possible. I've not heard about the Australia one. Yeah,
Well,
essentially an
that-
initiative to make it so that games remain playable in some form at the end of their lifespan, be that through private servers. And it's not like, there's a lot of misinformation that's gotten floated around about Stop Killing Games. It's not like, oh, the devs have to make a new mode or whatever to like make sure it can be playable, or they need to balance the game around single player or whatnot. What it is that basically the code for the servers needs to exist afterwards so that people can host their own servers.
Which is a thing that has been available for
Quite a
online
number of
games
games,
of any
yeah.
kind for a very long time. There's a reason that people still play the original like Quake and stuff to this day.
Yeah.
It's because it has the infrastructure to be able to let people run their own servers completely divorced from the developers or the publisher or whoever. Like this is not new technology. It's not what I'm saying is it's not a big ask at all.
It's meant to prevent things like what we're going to talk about in the rest of this episode, which is games like Wildstar, and like Anthem's joining the list, Avengers and whatnot. Games that have become unplayable. Well, actually, Avengers is technically still playable. Anthem won't be unplayable until it actually goes offline. But Wildstar and Concord are our best like shows of games that have really fallen to this. That said, like, this is a really challenging initiative, and the petition doesn't actually mean anything's going to happen, but it does mean that it gets seen by politicians, which is always useful, even if nothing comes of it. So, good thing to support if you're interested in game preservation.
It's also I don't know if we want to get into this part of the Stop Killing Games
Oh, we can.
discussion. It is also really important to understand what this movement is actually about before you
Yes.
actually start talking some dumb shit on your public platform.
from what I can see, there isn't a separate one from Australia.
Yeah, well, we're
for
not throwing
Australia.
direct shade at anybody, but I think everyone knows who Wyatt's talking about, so we'll move.
Yeah, listen. I don't want to turn our podcast into that. I think it's just good. If you have a public platform, I think it's good to do a little bit of research before
Or
you
state
start.
that you're uninformed. One of the two. We're
Or-
very clear
or
here about
if
how
you think you're
uninformed we are.
informed, Or if you think you're informed and you are giving overwhelming amounts of information and facts telling you that you're wrong, maybe take it on the chin and say I was wrong, and then fucking move on.
Go mea culpa,
No, you gotta
know,
double
and move
down.
on. Look, nobody likes it when you double down on the Mana Gem story. Okay, moving on.
or when you accept defeat, no one likes that either, apparently. So
Uh-huh. Alright. Let's talk about dead games. Because that's the topic of today's episode. So the one that I want to open up by mentioning, and this is a game I think I'm probably the only one who actually played this, although Wyatt, maybe you did. Wildstar is
Oh, I always wanted to. I think it's so sad. When I heard what this game was, I'm like, that sounds fucking sick. I want to check this out. It had been like a month since the servers had shut down.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wildstar wasn't super long-lived, but from what I played of it, I generally really enjoyed it. I think it was a really good MMO. For the time, it's a sci-fi sort of adventure MMO that had some really cool life path systems where you could, like, when you made a character, you get a selection of, I think it was 3 options as to how you wanted to level and whatnot. And there were things like, combat or PvP or exploration, and that was really cool. You got, like, your own... kind of similar to how like WoW has the Horde and Alliance choice. This was their kind of equivalent of that, and that it sent you into these life paths, and you had different experiences. So that was very fun. And yeah, it's sad that it went away, and it also had one of the best housing systems of an MMO that's been available. I think ESO has started to step up, but still isn't quite where WildStar is. Fingers crossed that WoW is going to be there when the WoW housing system releases. But yeah, very, very fun housing system that people took tons of advantage of. And the game's just fully unplayable now. There's a bunch of efforts to try to make a private server, but because the server tech was never released for it, there's not an easy way for that to happen. So I believe the group that's doing that effort to get it to pop back up again is fully recoding the game functionally.
oh my god.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy effort.
How many sci-fi MMOs are out there, especially ones that are available currently? Like
Not many.
other than Old Republic, like
I was gonna say, Old Republic is still working, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it is, but
that's
Star
one.
Wars is like it's such a big IP that it's hard to, I think, quantify it as sci-fi in some ways. As much as I like Old Republic,
It's
Sci-fan.
science fantasy. Yeah, more
there's
so
Star
than-
Trek Online, which I've heard is actually going pretty strong, but I don't know what that means compared to other MMOs and whatnot.
Yeah.
Not sure how well it's doing. But yeah, WildStar was like the one that I think had the most open appeal. It had some really, really cool stuff in it. And yeah, fully unplayable, which is very, very sad because it had some really great systems. And especially like the telegraphing that it did was, I think, the first game that really pushed telegraphing that hard, aside from maybe Final Fantasy XIV. But it had a really great system for like telegraphing what enemies were doing and what players were doing. And it made it like split the difference between an action mode and a more like tab target, which was really fun. But yeah, I'm still very sad that WildStar went away, and I would love to play it again at some point. But unfortunately,
I'd love to check it out, man.
You know what? I can take advantage of this conversation to talk about again. What game?
yeah,
What MMO specifically that was very near and dear to my heart? Lego Universe.
yes,
Oh,
yeah, Lego
I
Universe
miss it
absolutely fits here.
every day.
that was another one where I think I had checked it out. If I'm thinking of the right one, I was like, "Oh, this looks cool," and I checked it out because they had a free version. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure.
Yep, that's the one that I
Um,
was using, and it did not restrict your building capabilities at all. You had essentially like the not not line of code per line of code, but you had like the building program that they used to digitally make Lego kits in there
Yeah.
for making like stuff in your home base.
Well, that was another example of like, "Oh, this looks really cool." I played it for like a month, and then I heard that the servers were going to shut down. I feel like I always have the worst timing with these things.
Mhm.
You're doing it, Wyatt. Every time you show interest in an MMO, this happens.
I know. I'm like the Grim Reaper meme where he's going from door to
no.
door, but it's just MMOs.
Oh, this is interesting. Opens tab. The date has
Dead.
been set.
Dead.
Yeah. Yeah, I think WildStar is the poster child for this type of thing. And WildStar's in a unique situation because I think in general it's remembered pretty favorably compared to a couple of the other games we're going to talk about, which I would say are generally remembered pretty negatively, or just flat across the board. With WildStar being kind of an exception in that, I think the public sentiment of WildStar is pretty good still. And it only lasted, I believe, about 4 years. I don't think it was active for much longer than that.
Oh.
Which yeah, it was a real shame. All right. Second game I want to talk about, and this is one that I think we have all played. Actually, I know we've all played it because I made everyone play it. Is Anthem, because Anthem's the latest in this tale of
yeah.
games getting shut down. So Anthem servers are going to be shut down, and the game will, to my understanding, be unplayable. Again, it could be that the single player mode is playable, but at least the server side stuff is going to be shut down.
So it's still playable in some way, but servers will.
Maybe. Let me verify this, because I think it is. It might actually be fully unplayable. This is one of those ones where it's hard to find actual clarification of this.
While I'm going to give you some time to look that up, and I'm just going to say, if it is completely unplayable, no matter how you feel about that game, I don't think any of us were particularly a fan of the game after we had played it on stream.
Yeah, no.
No matter how you feel about the game, the fact that it is no longer available to play in any way, if it is completely unavailable, is still a really, really bad thing.
Yeah, game entirely will not be playable. So it is not playable even if you bought it.
Even for someone who's never played it, doesn't care, or maybe you're someone who did play it and was really disappointed, whatever. The fact that it's not available is still a really bad thing, because it is history that is essentially completely inaccessible by anyone.
I'll also say Anthem has a lot of negatives with it, but it's also one of the only games that plays like it does. And if you're really into the like stompy mech suit fantasy, it's one of the few games that actually had a loop built around that, even if it wasn't great. It's one of those things where like I feel like Anthem actually probably had a dedicated audience. It was just not very large. Because like I like being able to run around and have bunches of missiles and whatnot, but I didn't like the rest of the game because it had some of the worst story presentation I've seen, especially coming from BioWare. But it is a real shame that it's going to be completely unplayable.
Some of the worst mission design in a MMO that I've seen, as well. Really, really shockingly barren. But
especially because it's hard to know like whether or not Anthem was meant to be an MMO. Like it's clear in some of the gameplay footage or trailers that they did well beforehand. It was billed that way with their like, I still remember the fake gamer talk. Anthem trailer
God,
from
the scourge of
ago.
gameplay reveals.
Well, the one thing I always come back to is like when that giant expose came out about the game's development, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the biggest.
How about them roadmaps, huh?
Well, one of the biggest bombshells from that entire investigation was the people working on that game didn't know what kind of game they were working on until everyone saw it at E3, until they announced it. And so when all the developers were working on it, because of just massive amounts of miscommunication.
Yeah, that's got to be some crazy amount of mismanagement or something.
So the people who were making the fucking game saw it at E3 and they were like, "Oh, that's what we're making." Like, I can't even like the complete breakdown in communication that has to happen in order for even a few developers to feel that way is wild.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that I think we all think about, having been involved in game development and in many cases still being involved. And there's lots of things that you end up thinking about with this type of games not existing and whatnot, especially in like the volatile industry we're in right now, where studios have been vanishing into the ether. It always feels bad to think about, and you're just like, oh well, what do these people do that have spent time working on these games that have up and vanished into the air? And I feel the same way about games like this that are so slowly dying over time, like Anthem and Avengers and whatnot, because those games, like, yes, public opinion on them is pretty bad, and maybe they're not great, but they're still a record of something, right? They're a record of the work that's done on them, and it's sad to see them go.
And at the end of the day, people spent however much money, $60, whatever, on the game, and that is being taken away from them now, with no kind of like refund or sunsetting anything. It's just taken away from them. And again, no matter how you feel about the game, that's why Stop Killing Games is so important, because people are still paying for these things.
It's something that I've been going back and forth a lot until where I have fully not been able to form an opinion on. I'm just trying to find more info. But I see so many people And like it's the Stop Killing Games petition isn't saying like that you need to give people a refund, but I've been seeing a lot of people tangentially around the conversation of the Stop Killing Games petition being like, oh yeah, if the content's going to be taken away from me at this point, well, where's my $60 back?
Yeah.
Which there is something to be said for that, but it's also, I feel like you're paying for the time spent entertained by the game as well, so that could be an avenue that people say like that makes you ineligible for a refund or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I need to see more things about it because it's something I've been tangentially exposed to.
Well,
Yeah, it's just
It's a weird avenue.
Well, it's why what's being proposed is the best option, which is like, hey,
Mhm.
like we're not asking for refunds, we're not asking for games for like only single player games to be developed. It's just a way for these multiplayer only games or games that rely on some sort of internet connection to still be available, just have it taken out of the developer's hands if they're, if they're done with it. It's the best
Right.
solution that we have for this sort of thing. Um,
yeah.
and I do think the problem with that too, is that only applies to like multiplayer games. A whole
Mm-hmm.
other separate
Mm.
issue is single player games that still, for whatever reason, require an internet connection, or
There's that,
single
and there's
player
also
games.
Oh,
delistings, are another
yeah.
big factor. And
100%.
what you just mentioned, Wyatt, is actually what I wanted to move on next to, which is things like I don't know if anyone here remembers this or was playing PC games at the time that it happened, but the shutdown of Games for Windows Live
Oh God,
ages and ages ago.
Oh.
I do
So
remember having to deal with that.
I wasn't playing many PC games when this happened, but there's a lot of games that I've become interested in well afterwards that still are affected by the shutdown of Games for Windows Live, and that's what these games all used as a network service, and generally used as basically DRM as a way to like sign into the game and whatnot, keep account progress. And that meant a lot of these games are fully unplayable afterwards because of like a sign-in requirement for Games for Windows Live. The one that I most think about is a game called Lost Planet 2, which is a
Oh God, yeah,
fascinating
yeah.
series to talk about because it's like essentially Monster Hunter with guns on frozen planets, which is
Well, except for the
very
third one.
cool. Yeah, except for the third one, which was a weird offshoot that wasn't as good, but they were very cool games. And Lost Planet 2 is just like fully unavailable on PC now, despite like to my understanding functionally working great if you can get past the Games for Windows Live stuff. But it's been delisted and it's just unavailable for purchase because of the fact that it just can't really be played easily, which is a real shame because it's such a unique franchise and a really interesting game to play, especially for people that like that type of thing. There's a lot of reasons to enjoy that game. So seeing stuff like that not available, or just games that are plagued by like issues related to these servers, is really unfortunate.
I mean, thank God we got Titanfall 2 restored somewhat, but Titanfall 2 was in
Mm.
a similar situation where,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could at the time you could go onto a multiplayer game of Titanfall 2, but then it has no security whatsoever. I remember logging on and playing a few games back when this was still an issue, just to see what would happen. And I played a few games and they were okay, but then I was getting tons of Google alerts saying that my email was being used for a bunch of stuff,
Oh my
which was
God.
like
Mm-hmm.
genuinely terrifying. I got it sorted out, but like I was like, yeah, that was quick. And that's the other. It's like it's still there, but do not do not access it at all.
Yeah.
I I'd like to touch on something potentially quick that could spiral into another um avenue of discussion. So feel free to cut that off. Um, but you mentioned a phrase at the beginning of the podcast: companies sunsetting their games. To my knowledge, that phrase was started by Bungie.
Yeah,
when
I'm
they
not
were
100% positive that it was started by Bungie, but it's definitely been used by them.
with
Um,
most extensively to my knowledge.
yeah, yeah.
Um, which say what you will about Bungie and Destiny 2. Destiny 1 is still playable in its entirety except for events.
That's the thing that gets me with Destiny in particular is that like there's a assuming the game was made in a pretty good way, and the server is not so expensive to run. Because that's something to clarify with us. We've been talking a lot about stop killing games and like the benefits that it has. But there is like another side of that, which is like developers and server costs, right? It's not free to run a server for a game. There's a big reason why like MMOs are super expensive to make. It's because of those server costs. And yeah, you end up paying tons and tons for that type of thing. Which is why it's mostly big studios that have the funds to do that and can scale to it, and why games like Wildstar end up dying really quickly if they don't hit the numbers they need because those costs are really prohibitive. Which is why the goal of stop killing games is not to say those servers need to be running all the time. It's players should have the ability to make their own afterwards. Which again, another clarification of that is not it should be easy. Like it's not like the developers need to tell you how to do it. It's just give them the ability to do it in whatever form that takes and then let them run wild with it.
Don't lock it behind DRM.
Yeah. And we see that with things like a City of Heroes is another good example of an MMO that basically died and has now been revived in private servers, which is super cool.
That's not the
It was
DC superhero MMO.
No,
is
it was like the first major superhero MMO, but it's not a property. Like it isn't owned by something. It's actually still pretty fun to play. I actually went back and when these servers went up, tried it out for a little while, and it is enjoyable and really interesting. So I think that's a big reason why these things are necessary. But yeah, server costs are a huge factor, and it's not like the movement of stop killing games is not trying to make that stuff go away, right? Like it's still a problem that devs need to face, and like what happens is going to be up to those costs and whatnot. And in particular, in the case of Wildstar, like Wildstar died because its audience just wasn't big enough, which is a bad thing to say for a game that I really liked, but it was a game that was really advertised around heavy rating and like PvP and whatnot. And that audience is notoriously very passionate but very small. And they tend to gravitate to the same games, so they'll typically play the game that they've been playing rather than move to other things. And so that's why you see stuff like this, where you're like, oh, Wildstar aimed for these players and just couldn't sustain itself long term because of that. Though Wildstar's a weird exception because it had a bunch of other stuff too. Like it had things that like myself as a more casual MMO player really enjoyed. But yeah, it's stuff like that that makes you think about this type of thing quite heavily.
Well, there is that kind of interesting, and it's not 100% related to you know, sunsetting and all these other things, but there is that interesting conversation of like, well, some of these games, even during development, one questions like, what were you even expecting with this? It's like something like Anthem. It's like you're releasing this thing in a crowded space from a developer that nobody wants making this kind of game. Like, were you really expecting to keep the servers on for this thing? like there's that conversation of like, should this even have been released in the first place? Like, were you really expecting for this game to take off in any way? It is.
Yeah.
It is kind of like a bizarre kind of tangential conversation to have, uh, because there's like no right answer to that, because sometimes like decisions are made and projects are put out and there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of odd.
I think in particular this is the best game to look at currently, and this is one we've talked about a little bit already, but I think is a really good example is Concord. Because Concord's a really specific thing that happened, in that it was just fully launched into a market that had no room, in my opinion. And it even, no matter how good that game was, unless it was free and so much better than the alternatives that it pulled people to it, it just didn't have a chance. And that's not like a slight at the devs. In fact, I think from what I've heard, they did a pretty good job at making a good, like,
I played
team
the
shooter.
beta, and was fine. I've played way worse. I've played way better, but
Exactly. This is the
it's
scenario where like
okay.
fine is no longer good enough, right? It's the
Yeah.
type of thing.
Which that's a whole other video's worth of discussion right there
Exactly,
on
but it's
that
like it's
mentality
intrinsically
alone.
tied with what we're
100%.
talking about because most of the games that have
100%.
suffered this are games that have had some problem, and I generally separate them into two big categories, which is things like Concord and Anthem, which is like they just weren't quite enough to stand out for whatever reason, for whatever thing. There wasn't enough there to grab people, whether that be the crowded market or just like fundamental issues with the game. And then there's a second group, which is games that did have something really unique and interesting, but just did not have the financial management to be able to succeed. With stuff like that, to me, is Wildstar. Star Wars Galaxies is, I think, a good example for anyone that played that. For those who don't know,
That's very
Galaxies was
familiar.
the big Star Wars MMO before SWTOR, and it was really cool. It had one of the most like player-driven setups of any MMO, where they like players could build cities, they could do all this stuff that was really unique. But the game itself just had a lot of issues as the time went on, and the actual audience got really tired of it. And they started doing things like adding Jedi in a way that was just like really awkward for the way that the game had been set up.
Oh, it was one of those like non-Jedi focused Star Wars.
It was primarily not Jedi, so you could become a
Oh,
I like it
Jedi.
already.
Yeah, you could become a Jedi, but it was like super hard to do, and generally was super specific. But it was also a game that had a lot of things like permadeath. It was really hardcore.
oh,
Oh,
jeez.
Compared to things, which is why, like, yeah, the super interesting game. I wish there was a way to play it on a private server. Um, it was just definitely a thing that like was so much more hardcore uh, that it definitely, I think, has kind of lost it in the modern era. As much as I would love to have played it again.
I wonder if it was more like simmy in that sense with permadeath being an issue, or if it was sort of like oops, misclick, make a new character.
Yeah, it's definitely a more hardcore thing. And yeah, I think there are private servers, but they're not generally doing really well. So yeah, that's the gist of my thoughts on a lot of the stuff with especially the MMO side is just like I think they generally didn't succeed in terms of monetization and whatnot as time went on. A big thing with Wildstar too is Wildstar had like you could buy subscription time with real money and then sell it. Kind of similar to a WoW token, which WoW's had for a long time, but they had a thing that was like cred.
Huh.
But I think for them, the economy of the cred did not work out in a way that was good. Like it didn't quite fall where they had needed it to be like a generally good thing. Because a lot of the reasons games will have like, oh, you can buy the subscription token with real, or not real money, but real money or in-game currency, is generally like a way to combat gold selling. That's a pretty common reason because if you give a dev sanctioned way for that to exist, people are far less likely to turn to the more risky like account stealing methods, which is really sad.
Oh,
If you lose an account or something like that. So yeah, it gets into the complicated whole bit of MMO design.
yeah.
But yeah, to
And
pull us back to where we were with Concord, that one in particular just I think is a crazy story because how recent it is and how high scale it was. Like that it wound up with the closure of a studio very quickly comparatively to anything else we talked about.
what was it? Was it 2 weeks?
I don't think it was 2 weeks. It was like a month and a half or something.
Okay.
well, and let's keep in mind too, it wasn't just a closure of a studio. It was a closure of a brand new studio that was specifically brought
Brand new
together to
studio,
make games like this, filled with
and
talented people.
to our understanding, kind of the end of Sony's live service push in a weird way. Uh,
I'll say this. I'll say this. If there's anything good that came out of that entire scenario, it may have been that because I would have very much been disappointed if that was something that Sony wanted to continue with.
Yeah.
Because I just don't think that's where their strength is, and I think they fill a very particular spot in the AAA industry that we desperately need right now, which is single player finished video games.
Yeah,
Hey,
games that come out
Yote
and are
coming out
done.
this year.
Yeah, which is not even a
Tremendously
sentence I
excited.
should be saying, but that's where we are.
Well, it's something that has happened, like, as games get more expensive to make and have bigger teams and whatnot, you run into the problem of they need to fund themselves better. And that's, like, we're seeing Nintendo is raising prices. Sony tried to push for live service, and all this sorts of stuff is, like, trying to answer that question. Because the expectations of, like, your average game player are always going up. Like, they're going to keep going up for eternity. Your only hope is that they reset with, like, people that are young, right? That, like, when someone's coming in, they don't have those lofty expectations for the first time, so they're not as highly tuned. But it's like the example of the, like, classic concept of the World of Warcraft killer being a thing and just never succeeding. Yeah, I think is often just because of that, like, people trying to go for content. It's also like we don't need to be adversarial in how we produce games. Like, that's always a weird advertising thing.
There were a lot of Halo and Call of Duty killers back in the day.
Yeah,
too. That was always the like hot button sort of thing. Was just like, oh, look at this game. It kind of looks like Halo. It's the new Halo killer. Remember Haze?
dude.
Oh,
Halo
was that
killer,
bee
baby.
thing?
I
Was that
remember
that-
Brink.
Brink.
Was it Brink?
Yep.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Homefront.
Oh, I know
Yep.
Homefront.
Homefront was interesting though, because Homefront had single player campaigns that were generally pretty good, to my understanding. Until
Well,
I think Revolution was pretty iffy.
Well, there were only 2 games. It was the first one, which was so underwhelming and led and kind of landed with a bit of a thunk, and then the second one was in development hell for a while. And it switched studios multiple times. The people who actually ended up releasing it was Dambuster, who is basically the remnants of Free Radical, who did like Time Splitters and all these fucking cool games.
Ooh.
They were originally making the old Battlefront 3. I'm getting way sidetracked
Oh my
right now.
God.
I just think Dambuster's history is very fascinating.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing to talk about.
But there's another, like, there's so many different avenues with this conversation, and like something that's more recent, very recent, in fact, is kind of like a two-parter. One, the concept of a single player game that even if you buy it physically is essentially just an installer, right? So we've had this in whatever, we've had this in modern gaming spaces for a while, but it's also infected Nintendo now, which was
Oh, go
originally
with the
not really the
virtual
case.
cartridge. God.
Have we talked about virtual game cards? Like,
Oh,
did we talk
what?
about it
Not
during
fully.
our, like,
We've
Mario
mentioned
Kart?
it before.
Can I talk about how
It
much
leaves
I
a
hate
bad
this?
taste in my mouth just saying that.
It is related, so I'm just
Yeah.
gonna complain about how much these things suck. So let's talk about this for a second. For anyone watching who may not know or may not fully understand how these work, I want to say a majority of physical Nintendo Switch 2 releases, notably, none of them are going to be, at least for the time being, Nintendo first party games. They're all going to be on the actual card, which is good. But
Mm.
especially third party, I want to say the vast majority of third party physical releases are game key cards, which is basically just a hunk of plastic with an installer that then is the internet's required to get the whole game onto your console. And this is just like, in terms of game preservation, in terms of trying to make sure these games stick around for as long as we do, this is just the absolute wrong direction to go in, because there will be a day when they are not available anymore.
Yeah.
It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, whatever. It could be 2 months.
It's like Nintendo is
Doesn't
actively
matter.
trying to have their games become lost media.
And the excuse for this is like, it's like the thing that pisses me off the most, which is like, well, we want games to be able to be on this platform, and games that maybe are bigger than the cards that we can mass produce. Like sometimes a game's install size, especially these days, is so huge that you can't get it onto one of a Nintendo Switch 2 game card, right?
Then
But
do the thing that PlayStation did, have 2 discs.
that does not excuse things like Puyo Puyo Tetris being a fucking key card. Puyo
Yeah.
Puyo Tetris is a fucking key card.
I'll say that's the thing
the
that gets me
cheaper
with the game
option.
key cards is like I understand why they exist. I understand the developer incentive to use them, which is like, hey, we don't want to pay for the actual storage. The problem is, as a game player, I don't understand why I would ever want one. Like that's where the disconnect is for me. Is that like I understand the dev perspective on this. I don't get the player side of like and in order to have a successful thing in games, you have to meet both. Like you have to be a successful thing for both players and developers. And game keycards to me are just not it. Like at least for me, I've not bought one. Like I'm not buying any physical Switch stuff that is a game keycard.
Or that thing where it's like, oh, but you can share it with your friends that way. You know how else I can share games with my friends? Mailing them the cartridge.
Or
giving it to
Nintendo
them.
has their own system that you can share with your friends without needing the keycard. And it's more convenient because I don't need to be able to physically give you the card. Like, Wyatt and I are in the same like friends and family Nintendo plan, and if we wanted to, we could share our like digital games with each other, because of how that system works. But if we had gotten a game key card, because I'm in California and he's on the other side of the country, what do you do then? It's not really a solution. I think the only real benefit is you can like sell it back for trade-in credit or something. But
oh, GameStop trade-in credit. Oh, you'll get
trade-in
2
credit
cents
with your digital key card.
You'll get 2 cents.
We
back.
might be able to get $6 back if games cost $80 now.
It's honestly impressive. It is honestly impressive that they have scientifically found the worst of both worlds in terms of physical media and digital media. Like they could not have nailed it more in terms of getting the worst of both worlds. Like the downsides of physical media is that compared to digital media, it's clumsy to in comparison, at least, it feels clumsy to like put in a new game. Things could get damaged, scratched, lost, whatever. And it can be a little bit annoying if you want to switch to a different game. You gotta do the process of whatever. But then the downsides of digital is that you don't actually own the game; you own a license to play the game. And there's this constant feeling of like I bought a digital code and not something that was actually mass produced. Why am I paying the same amount for technically speaking getting less? It's like the worst of both worlds. It's actually kind of impressive.
I don't know about you. I would rather no longer be able to play a game because I scratched the disc rather than it being taken offline or taken away from because of some like perceived alteration. Oh, like Nintendo, discovering mods on something. Oh, we're gonna brick your console.
They've bricked Switch 2s because someone used a pre-owned game. I don't know if you heard about this.
Yeah, that was
wild.
Like not my VHS copy, my DVD copy of my VHS copy of Treasure Planet is so worn out from me watching it now that I can't play it anymore. I'd prefer that rather than it being taken off of a streaming service that it was on.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay, I've got a weird one to throw us into now, which is a side of this discussion that I don't think many of us have thought about, but has been in the news before, which is Nintendo stuff. In particular, Nintendo's like quote unquote arcade things, like the eShops for their older consoles. So
like with the 3DS one shutting down.
With the 3DS and the WiiWare, functionally are now shut down and completely unavailable. And there are actually some really cool games available only through those systems. One of the big ones that this one actually is available, and I encourage you to look it up if this sounds interesting, because it's one of the few that got saved because the developer actually put it onto Steam in 2022. In addition to it having been a 3DS like arcade game called Automaton Lung, which is a really wacky, cool, like almost Metroidvania platformer for the 3DS. It looks insane. It's a very like wacky game, and it plays in an unlike anything you'll have ever played. But it is very interesting, and games like that I find are always the most fascinating. And it generally makes me very sad when they're unavailable completely. So I'm super excited to have seen them put onto Steam for that to be played again. But there are plenty of other titles that haven't. There's tons of like experimental JRPGs that are on the 3DS.
Don't scroll down. There's fan art.
You're right over there, Alex.
Yeah, if you look at the Google images, don't scroll down.
Okay.
What?
This is why we have you here. Look, this is why we have artists on the show, because I'm sure the artist's search history is going to be the most confusing pile of things.
The algorithm just doesn't know what to do with
it. It doesn't understand. But yeah, the Nintendo side of things I think is really wacky, because Nintendo is one of the least preserved companies, or the least interested in preserving their games companies relative to like the quality and availability of their catalog.
Just disappointing.
Least interested in preserving specifically games that a lot of people would like updates to.
Yeah, because I have a feeling why you're just about to talk about this is like they're extremely litigious. Like they.
Well, there's that, but also it's disappointing that Nintendo is the least interested, because Nintendo is such like. There's a lot of things about Nintendo that I fucking cannot stand.
Yeah.
I kind of hate them as a company in a lot of ways, but they are the reason that we have video games in America. They single-handedly brought the video games market back from the dead in the mid-'80s. Like, they are so important to video game history as a whole. They have done so much in terms of like bringing technology and design forward, but they are the least interested in protecting any of this stuff. That's the most disappointing part.
Which is wacky because Nintendo is so adventurous with their hardware. They like to do things that are really out of the box, and that means that when those things are gone or not really available, they're really hard to play. And the benefit of something like the Wii, which is one of the most popular Nintendo systems, if not, I think still the most popular.
Wow.
There are plenty of people making like Wii hardware, quote unquote, that you can use on Dolphin, which is an emulator, to functionally play Wii games. And regular Wii stuff is still readily available on the secondary market just because of how many Wiis were sold. Like, it's still pretty easy to find one. But that does mean it's still really hard to get games. So if you wanted to play any of those eShop games, you're just out of luck. Unless you are willing to sail the high seas. There is just not a solution for you. Or get a console that already has them on it.
And Nintendo, of any other company, is very much against you sailing those high seas, which again just
they will
makes
make it
this
very
whole
difficult.
Makes this whole situation that much more frustrating.
Which is weird because that's a really complicated issue, and one that like generally I understand the effort of like, hey, I can pull up my Nintendo Switch 2 and play all these Game Boy games on that. Isn't that awesome? Which it is really cool that that's just part of it. But it's weird that they're locked behind a subscription and not a thing you can buy individually if you wanted to. It's weird. Or physically.
Imagine how much money they could make if they just sold volumes of old Nintendo games.
Yeah, this is where I'm going to end up pulling out. This is my backpack that I walk to work with every day. And in this backpack that I walk to work with, because Nintendo is so bad with it, I have a little thing called the Analog Pocket, which right now has Golden Sun inside of it. Ooh. An original, actual copy of Golden Sun that runs, because the people that behind the analog systems are more interested in game preservation than Nintendo is. And this hardware can emulate a Game Boy or Game Boy Advance really well. And so it's the kind of thing where, like, I'm really glad that there are makers that are going out of their way for this type of thing and doing this stuff, but it is just rough that Nintendo in particular makes this so hard to do. But yeah, it's really interesting when you see these like secondary market things pop up as sort of solutions for this. Though that said, analog stuff is not always perfect. Like there's a lot of wacky things with analog, where like they have half support for things like emulation, which is understandable because analog really is interested in staying in Nintendo's good side, I would say, and that they largely support those individual original items, like the fact that I'm running
Especially
off of an
because
original cartridge.
especially
Um,
because they're so high profile that Nintendo definitely knows
yeah,
of them. Like they're not a small
but
company
like they
that can
have
get
good
away with
things here where like
anonymity.
the big benefit of something like this is that like lots of GBA games and lots of DS games and whatnot at the time had save batteries, and save batteries have a lifespan because batteries, no matter how good they are eventually going to drain with our current technology. Like there's just not a battery that will last forever. So a lot of the batteries that are in GBA games in particular are starting to go at this point. And so you're seeing things like they'll stop being able to save. The benefit of something like the Analog Pocket is you can still play that cartridge even if the save battery doesn't work and use save states. So you can still play those games as if you had the saving functionality without actually the cartridge being in perfect condition, which is one of the biggest benefits of them. But it's also just like it makes it really hard to for a person that didn't grow up and have a backlog. Like the Analog has a 3D thing coming out for the N64, which can play N64 cartridges. Super cool, but N64 stuff is hard to come by and generally pretty expensive at this point. So the availability of something like that is going to be much harder than the GPA library. So yeah, I'll be super interested to see how that progresses as they get that through fully shipping. But yeah, it's just fascinating how Nintendo handles their game preservation, and especially how much they don't handle it. I would say, considering that we have like a full remake of Wind Waker that exists and is just not playable on their current systems for some reason.
Don't get me started. I
That
don't
and
get
God,
me
Twilight
that's
going.
Princess
right.
HD, I just don't understand. I don't get it, especially considering they put the GameCube version in the software. Um, which reminds me, there was another point I was gonna make about Nintendo with this too. So I picked up, this is the GameCube controller that you can get from Nintendo Online if you're a member. Uh, Great controller, really good. It's an original style Nintendo GameCube controller, which is like a white whale in the secondary market right now because getting one that is like the quality level of a regular Nintendo one is really hard. That said, Nintendo's so specific about how this can be used, and they didn't use any standard controller profile. So like you can't plug this into a computer and play games with it because it just doesn't read like the Pro Controller does or anything. It reads like a weird, wacky other thing that you have to wait for someone to come out with a hack to use on a PC or something, which I don't get because I feel like Nintendo, a USB-C GameCube controller that is just like works out of the box and has the extra buttons. If it has like a little bumper button so you have all your inputs, even if you don't need them on GameCube stuff, would be great to use on other things, but they just aren't interested in supporting that, which is a real shame. So you can use it for like 3 games right now. You can play Wind Waker, you can play F-Zero, and I think they're adding something else. But
I do have a question. A lot of, especially with Nintendo, a lot of the reason that they do what they do is because they know they can get away with it, right? They know that they're not really going to lose a lot of support by doing these weird things. But kind of somewhat related to that as well. How much of this is based on public perception? Because I feel
yeah,
like I don't want to like because I stumbled across a very interesting conversation with Scott the Woz and a few other YouTubers that I thought was very interesting. Where something that he had mentioned was like people who play video games find it to be a much more disposable medium than something like movies or books
mm-hmm.
or music or whatever. And part of me is like, is that part of the problem where we find video games to be so disposable? Where like there's a new Call of Duty game every single year. Who cares if Call of Duty Vanguard servers go offline because we're already 6 Call of Duties removed from that at this point?
Mm.
How much? of video game preservation, how much of the issue that we're in is due to just people not seeing it as a medium that we should restore and catalog, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think that does make sense. I would say a lot of the time, I think the audience worries more about that than game companies do. Like the Call of Duty example, especially to me, like Call of Duty, to my knowledge, has never actually made it so that the multiplayer is completely unplayable on older games. I think until like console shifts.
To their
But even
credit.
then, on PC, like you can still play Modern Warfare, the original one, online if you
Oh.
It's
hook it
full
up.
of
It's great.
I mean, it's
It
full of
is full of
hackers, but you
hackers,
can
and I
do
wouldn't
it.
generally recommend it, but it is like it's available. Which honestly, that's a good analogy for stop killing games. It's like, yeah, the goal is just to make it available, and Call of Duty generally is, and yeah, I think it just is often just a reflection of, as you said, like we often treat games as disposable for whatever purpose. I think a good example is like The Crew. Being
That's
that the
one that they
first
mentioned by
one,
name on the Stop Killing Games
yeah, because The
segment.
Crew was one of the games that really kicked off Stop Killing Games, I would say, because The Crew 1, which at the time was like relatively recent in the mind, like it was delisted, and the server shut down about a year, or not a year, a decade after the game initially released, which for a game that is largely playable single player is odd. It definitely is like a very short time frame, and it's odd that Ubisoft just fully delisted it, because I do think the original Crew had some really cool stuff in it, like the oddly scaled down USA map is a fascinating like race map,
Its
and the
style is
handling in
really
it.
cool
Yeah, the style's really
in
cool.
terms
The music's
of
great. The handling of things is very unique compared to games like Forza. So it had an audience. In the Crew 2, like I've played a fair bit of it. I don't think the Crew 2 is as good as the Crew 1. Not to say that the Crew 1 was like amazing, but I did enjoy it a little bit more. And so not being able to play it if I ever wanted to is now just kind of sad. Like, oh well, I'll never remember driving down that weird wacky highway in the Crew because it's gone, and there's just nothing to be done about it. At least for, I think they said for the Crew 2 they're committing to making it available should it ever need to be delisted or need to be server downed or whatever. Um, but yeah, it's definitely a really interesting game with this type of thing. Yeah, I think they said it around the time that Crew Motorfest came out, confirming that Crew 2 would still be playable.
yeah.
Yeah, I think these are very good things to mention. Then there's stuff that's like a whole separate category of this, which is licensed games. Which this one I think is more understandable from a developer's perspective because they're not the license holders, and so they're kind of just bound by whatever the license holder agreed to. A good example is the Transformers games that used to be available, War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron, I think, which are legitimately great third-person shooter Transformer games that came out in the 360 era. They used to be readily available on most things, and now they've been removed from everything because of license requirements and whatnot, which is really sad because they were actually quite good, and I would pretty heavily recommend them over a lot of the Transformers stuff we've gotten recently. And yeah, it's a shame to see stuff like that go.
Or even like Devastation made by Platinum isn't
Yeah,
widely
Devastation's a bizarre
available.
case because that got delisted really quickly, and Devastation's reception was super good.
It's really fun.
Every time I get to beat the bolts out of a Decepticon, that joy is taken away from me.
Yeah, I'm really glad that I still have access to it because thankfully, if you had bought it, it stayed in our libraries on Steam,
Yeah.
so I can still play it. But yeah, it's crazy that the Platinum produced Transformers game, which is sitting at very positive on Steam after all these years.
Imagine that, a Platinum game is really good.
This was in the era, like it was 2015, so not that long after games like Metal Gear Rising, which were great.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
it's a real shame, yeah, that isn't viable anymore because
Well,
it was great.
and then there's and to jump off of that too, there's games that themselves are not licensed, but they contain licensed elements. So how many games are out there that have been removed, delisted because they have licensed music that they no longer can,
Oh.
access the rights for?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? Do you just update the game and replace it with like your own generic stuff? But then you have to like hire someone to make generic radio
It also
music or
depends on
whatever.
the
And it's
licensing agreement, because I think I remember this happening with a game. I can't remember what it was, where they had like licensed music, but had to remove it in a re-release. But I think there is some clarification there between like a re-release and the existing game of like most Rock Band and Guitar Hero games. If you bought the song DLCs that existed and whatnot, you do still have them. Like those are still things you can play. They weren't taken from you, but you can't buy them anymore. So like if there's specific songs you wanted, because I think that generally they were under like 5 to 10 year licensing deals. But that means a lot of those deals have faded now. It's been a long time since Rock Band and Guitar Hero were in like the zeitgeist. You start to see things disappear from their stores. So that's its own unique scenario, but at the same time, that's a lot more understandable because the music industry is so weird about licensing rights. And we're hitting the point where devs have to be like really specific about licensing in games and whatnot, just because of the costs and how rights holders handle that stuff.
it is something to be concerned about, because one game that comes to mind where this could be an issue in the future, right? If you play enough Returnal, you start to realize that the song "Don't Fear the Reaper" becomes a very, very important part of the story,
Yeah.
and even to a certain extent, the
Ooh.
gameplay. What's going to happen to that game 10, 15 years from now? You know,
That's a curious thing with a
It
game like Death
scares me.
Stranding, that has a
Yeah.
licensed soundtrack. Granted, it seems like Death Stranding might have been a little bit more careful about their licensing to account for that.
Well, it seems like a lot of the music was bespoke to Death
Yeah, a
Stranding.
lot of
Like, I know the
bespoke to
second
Death
game.
Stranding things.
I know the second game, like Carolyn Polachek has a song, and she's a pretty
Yeah.
popular artist. But again, I think it was specifically made for Death Stranding, so I think that kind of dodges a lot of the licensing rights that you'd otherwise have.
Yeah. It's really funky how all that stuff works, but very interesting to think about. So I hope a lot of these games keep their soundtracks and whatnot over time, but it's definitely possible that this will become a more common issue in the future as more games have started using licensed music uh, going on.
Well, and it's good that some of those games have a streamer mode, but when they launch, so they have a built-in alternative.
Well, streamer mode's a whole separate thing because I love that games have streamer modes, and especially in games where like the licensed music isn't important to the story, makes more sense, right? Or in like the case of Hi-Fi Rush, where they made bangers
Yes.
that you can alternate to. Where like I would say
Yeah.
there's a legitimate reason to play through Hi-Fi Rush twice because of the streamer mode, because they made really good music to
The
accompany
new
it.
Game Plus is not licensed.
Yeah, with the only exception being there's that one, like the Wolfgang boss fight has the one really recognizable string tune that if you play the license or the streamer mode version, you don't get that, but otherwise it's still very
Oh,
good. So yeah, stuff like that is great, but when it comes to a game like Death Stranding, or like Wyatt mentioned earlier, that has music as part of the plot over the Reaper and whatnot, you end up in a situation where like if that gets removed, it now kind of hits different. Like it's not quite the same if you just change that out for something else. 'Cause, yeah, I think there is definitely something to be said for keeping um, whatever you can of that original experience intact.
And as good of a solution as that can be, there are still games that even if they have streamer modes, it really takes something away from the game. Perfect
Yeah.
example, Guardians of the Galaxy. So much of that game's identity
oh,
is all of the 80s classics that are in there. There is a streamer mode, which is great, but goddamn, it is not the same experience at
Yeah. It
all.
definitely
It
removes something from
sucks.
it. And again, this is not like a thing to say about game developers. Like this is largely not on game developers. This is a music
Yeah,
industry rights thing. But
100%.
when it affects this conversation, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to mention another game here that I know both of you have heard about, at least. I don't know if anyone else has played it. Godfall.
Oh God.
I've played a little bit of
oh,
Godfall.
I'm so
Uh,
sorry.
and this was actually okay. Godfall's an interesting one because
Okay.
Godfall, in the conversation of games like Anthem and Concord, did actually do relatively well. Like it did well enough to get an expansion.
oh no!
Um,
I thought you were talking about Greedfall.
oh no, Greedfall's a whole separate situation. First one's fun. Second one I'm real iffy on, but First one was good. Godfall is the game that was like big, shiny, almost Infinity Blade looking, coming out with like the PS4's original launch, the PS5's original launch, one of the two.
How dare you? You just insulted Infinity Blade.
Yeah, but I'm not wrong. It does kind of have that look.
It's like if Infinity Blade, the art direction was done by
Had a
Donald
bigger
Trump.
poly.
Yeah, it was really gold. Yeah. But the reason I bring it up is because I've played a fair amount of Godfall, just because I tend to really like those like combat slasher games, and I really like looter games. It's my genre to play in. So I love those things, and something like Godfall seems like it's right up my alley. And then you play Godfall and you realize it isn't quite it doesn't quite hit right compared to other games that are like looters and whatnot. Just because Godfall, to me, their big misstep was that all the move sets were basically the same for every weapon, so there wasn't really, it didn't feel different to use any weapon from any other weapon. Even the player like classes were not particularly unique, but clearly it did well enough to exist for a while. And to me, the thing that really shot them in the foot was, I remember they went on PS Plus as a monthly game, but they didn't give people the version of the game that had the story. They gave people a new version of the game where you couldn't play the story, and it would just boot you directly to their like in-game stuff.
What?
And it was super confusing, really awkward.
So funny. That is
and so weird.
Funny.
Because I think their thought,
God.
they've done interviews about this, their thought was that, like, the story's not the best part of the game, so we just want to, like, skip past it for you. But that's so confusing as someone coming into a game for the first time, just go, okay, here's the game, we skip to the end of the story, you can do whatever you want. Super
That's
awkward
really
and
funny.
weird. Really not helpful.
Get a load of this this article headline. Elden Ring withdrawal made me give Godfall another chance, and I hated myself for it.
Like, Godfall's in my back pocket. That's for sure going to be a stream thing at some point when it's like $2.
Oh God!
As soon as it's readily acquirable for no
Bastard.
money, we're definitely going to play that. Just because it is such an interesting thing to play. Because legitimately, Godfall, I would say, has a fair amount of enjoyment to be had in it. Like, if you like its combat system, if you like that like Arkham-style parry combat, it is legitimately quite good at that. But that's the only thing. Like, that is what you're going to be doing the whole time. And that's it. There is nothing else, and that really limits its availability. But the reason I bring it up is because I think that very much fits squarely in that territory of games like Anthem and Concord, where it is odd that they just kind of, it existed, it kind of had its whimper, and then vanished from public thought. And I think the studio, there's been like rumors that the studio has shut down, but I don't know if it's actually ever been confirmed. They still have a website up. But yeah, Counterplay Games that made it. Seems like they didn't have any big success off of it, aside from their releasing that DLC. So it's just fascinating to think about. I'm curious if that game is going to go the way of the Dodo as well and become unpurchasable.
There is another category. So this game was like on my mind
Yeah.
when we figured out what topic we were doing this week. And I think there's not a lot of games that kind of fulfill this section of unavailable games, but games that are unavailable out of pure spite.
Yeah.
The immediate example that comes to mind, PT, was removed.
That's a good one.
Because Konami were dickheads. And no other reason.
Yeah, this is an interesting category too.
Because like, how many games are actually in this category?
Wow.
Genuinely, I like off the top of my head, like I can think
PT's
of
definitely
PT,
the biggest.
but like off the top of my head, how many games were removed out of pure spite? Is that what happened to Sunken City? Or no, it was like the developers of Sunken City were like stripped of the rights of the game or something, right? I'm trying to remember how that went down.
Yeah, so Sunken City, it's available again,
Sunken City.
and I believe it goes to the rights holders, or the devs that made it. But there was a dispute between them and the developers, the rights holders and the developers, that like the rights had gotten moved to a person they shouldn't have, and then they went rogue and released like a broken version of the game. as the re-released version, and there were a whole bunch of issues. So yeah, Sunken City went into a whole kerfuffle. To my understanding, it's now fully resolved, and you can play the game like normal and buy it still. But it was unavailable for a significant period of time.
Yeah. But
7 out of 10
PT
on Steam, 7.8 on IGN, 3 out of 10 on GameSpot.
but like that PT is the crowning example of games that were removed out of spite. After everything that happened with Kojima and Konami, they just removed it for reasons. But the reason being that there was a falling out, and that's it.
Yeah, I think like
I'm sure
the
it's more complicated
closest
than that, but
the closest things I can kind of think of, Scalebound.
ooh.
It was never
Oh.
playable by regular audience like PT was, but did just kind of vanish into the ether as a really high profile game due to development issues. And like we know now that Platinum has gone through a pretty rough patch. Like they've had a bunch of weird releases. They had Babylon's Fall, which was just like truly devoid of substance, is the way I would put it.
So Beyond Good and Evil 2 wouldn't really fit into this category then either, because of the knowledge
You know,
of development.
we'll see in the
that
next
it
5 years maybe whether or not it fits in this
Ryan,
category.
Ryan, that's
5
really
years,
unfair.
wow, that's a pretty
Ryan,
tight time schedule.
That's really unfair to the developers. Next 15 years.
Yeah, next 15 to 20. Which I really want Beyond Good and Evil 2, but I am 0% confident in that game. Though I will say,
Okay.
Beyond Good and Evil 2 did legitimately have gameplay released. Never
Yeah.
playable by other people, but it had a gameplay trailer that was actual gameplay with like a mission sequence, which that type of thing is crazy to me that got released and then it's been radio silence for like 5 years. Yeah, there's we should do a whole episode about that at some point.
Hey,
There's
you
just
know what
plenty to
other
talk about
game has
there.
been in
an episode
development hell
on-
for over 10 years and then finally released?
Yeah, have
Duke
we done
Nukem.
an episode on development hell? Like
I
why
think we
those
did
things
one
happen?
way back.
way long ago, but we definitely could give it a rehash
you-
since there's
I will
so many more
say-
things.
I will say we may not even have to do an episode like that. Just watch What Happened. That YouTube series is fantastic.
Yeah, what happened in Death of a Game? We'll give you
And
good
Death
ideas
of
of
a
a lot of
Game.
this stuff.
Yeah. Hint, it comes down to a lot of the same things happening every single time. For each story, there's usually 3 or 4 things that always happen. Which is very funny.
I think
yeah,
technically
like-
Ride to Hell Retribution is now unplayable.
Oh.
Ryan, it was unplayable when it came out. Okay.
Yeah, it's unpurchasable, so you can't. Not Steam.
Oh.
Google
That's the
says
only-
14% of people liked it.
That is the only game that I almost will argue that that's okay. I've played that fucking game, man. It is a travesty. It is unlike anything I've ever experienced and probably will ever experience.
Oh, what about games that got completely remastered or completely replaced by their remaster?
That's an interesting
That
one.
Ended up being a lot worse.
Is there a specific one you're thinking of?
The GTA remasters.
Yes, that was a really wacky circumstance with the like Vice City and or the like trio
Vice
they did.
City,
It was
3.
Vice City's 3 and San Andreas, I think, was the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Though I've actually heard that now it's fine, but it was a really bad thing at the start. So
Hey, you never hear about the gradual improvements after horrid shit shows.
yeah, unless it's a No Man's Sky situation. I think it's just because it now technically works and is not terrible.
I think as
It's a
time has
whole
gone
separate
on,
issue.
people are less willing to give developers grace for like improving their games because it should be the exception and not the rule, but it is kind of becoming the rule. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
for
in a
sure.
lot of cases, they don't even come anywhere close to the delta of quality that No Man's Sky has had, right? Like a lot of them, like they come out broken mess, and now 3 years later, the game is playable. Whereas, like Whereas like No Man's Sky has like so far surpassed making the game like bug free and playable that it's in such a separate league as other examples, you know. It's just gone so far and beyond what anyone was asking for at this point.
Yeah. There's another interesting one that this is a game that's really fascinating, and I don't know enough about it to go into a full deep dive, but have either of you heard of 6 Days in Fallujah?
Yes.
So
yeah, I remember
the
way back hearing
2025
about a
game
controversy with this game.
is out, and yeah, it's a pretty controversial game. Although I would say I think they blocked a lot of the stuff that was pretty controversial back, because it was based on the Iraq War, which is very recent relative to other games about wars generally are. So it's hitting a lot of stuff that's a little bit more still high wire, I would say. But the original 6 Days was announced in 2009. So there was a version of this game announced in 2009, which is about a year after the initial war incidents that it was based on, to my knowledge. So incredibly quick, and definitely out of taste, I would say at the time.
Well, and the other kind of issue was that it was based on like individual soldiers' experiences of that event, but one could point out that that's one very biased perspective on those events, and that's entirely what you're basing.
Recent. Like,
and that's entirely what you're basing your game around, is a very problematic way of going about your research.
Now, that game was canceled summarily in 2010, supposedly after being finished. Is the wild thing, is that the game itself was apparently done, and then Konami canceled it, and yeah, they fully abandoned the game, and now it's been brought in revived as the new 6 Days of Fallujah, which is purchasable. This game's out. I believe it's in early access, but you can buy it. It's from Highwire Games. So this is one of the weird cases where, like, yeah, that game existed, died, and then is now playable in a completely different scenario by a completely different developer and publisher. So very interesting case to think about. Especially because, yeah, the studio that it was originally doing it, Atomic Games, wound up going bankrupt pretty quickly after that initial period. Yeah, I don't know many other games that have had that exact scenario. Another one to mention, and this is going to hurt, I know, at least Wyatt and I's souls really hard as soon as I say the numbers. 1313.
Oh, no, Ryan, you underestimate me. This is the game that, when I saw it, made me want to go into video game development.
Everyone loved this when it was showed, and then it was canceled. It's been canceled for 10 years now, Wyatt. A little over 10 years. And that hurts to think about.
Ryan, my neighbor worked on this game.
Incredible.
What?
For the longest, I was like, he was waiting for like until I was 6 until he moved, because there's a pretty big age difference. So I don't think his parents even own the house anymore. But he came to my school for a career day and showed off Star Wars 1313. I was talking about it. This is, of course, after it got canceled, unfortunately. But oh my god.
Yeah.
He worked at Crystal Dynamics for a while. I believe Sledgehammer after that.
Yeah, because 1313 was LucasArts, which got shuttered, to my knowledge, after they were acquired by Disney, or Lucasfilm was acquired by Disney. And a lot of projects like this died. We got a weird revival, though, of like Return to Monkey Island wound up coming back, which is great.
Yeah.
Similar vein to 1313, and it's odd because we've kind of gone on a tangent into canceled games, but I think this is also showing like why these things happen. Is a game called Kingdoms of Amalur. So Kingdoms of Amalur is out. You can play it. I actually would say it's a great game. I really like Kingdoms of Amalur. Re-Reckoning is pretty recent, and it's a good remaster to go jump into. I don't know how it plays on the Switch 2, but I imagine great. So heavily recommend picking it up on a portable thing if you can. I knew someone who worked on this game. Actually, the person that got me into game development was someone who worked on it and was super chill dude, very cool. And then there was a game that we don't know the name of this. I think it had a project name called Copernicus, which is this 38 Studios way back when. It was canceled under incredible circumstances because the state of Rhode Island had given loans to the company.
I remember this. Yeah.
That led to the game getting
What?
canceled and completely shelved.
What?
And there's a bit of a controversy. So no one knows if Kingdoms of Amalur was actually meant to be like a prelude, like they have claimed it was, or if it was meant to be Copernicus and it was just repurposed. Because Kingdoms of Amalur is famous for having like huge zones that were designed in a very MMO-y way for a single-player game. And it's very odd that is a single-player game and not what it seems like to have been meant to be a multiplayer game.
Well, also they had big plans for Kingdoms of Amalur as a franchise.
Yeah, they wanted to turn it into a
Yeah.
whole
Which is the other
franchise.
crazy thing.
They had R.A. Salvatore writing it, who's a pretty well-known fantasy author. I've actually got a fair number of his books. He wrote the Drizzt books of the Forgotten Realms stuff, which are quite good. Really interesting D&D books. Yeah, very fascinating author involved. Gotta say, don't think he can write video games. It's very clear that he was really only doing the lore for Kingdoms of Amalur, because whenever someone starts speaking and it sounds like they're not talking to you and they're just giving you a wall of text, you're like, yeah, this was written by someone who doesn't play video games, at least at the time. Yeah, it was Kurt Schilling's studio. That's who it was.
Yeah,
the baseball star.
A Red Sox pitcher.
Oh.
Yep.
This game has such a crazy history attached to it.
It's also,
And-
hey, it's possible we get a follow because of Re-Reckoning.
And
Oh my God.
I'll point out, somewhat still related to our discussion, that was a game that was part of this awful trend during that era where games would basically come with like these codes. And the way it works, because publishers at the time were really trying to crack down on the used market because they felt like they were losing a lot of money to like secondhand games. So what they were doing at the time was basically you would buy the game and then you would need to input a voucher online in order to register the game. So if anyone else tried to play your copy of the game, they
Oh.
wouldn't be able to unless it was on your specific, hardware.
Oh, that's mean.
Which is also, I mean, I would say fairly related to our, and thank
Yeah.
God this is a thing that did not continue past the, mid 2010s or whatever. But that's another example of like, if that had continued to blossom and turned into its own thing, God knows where game preservation would be now. Probably worse than it already is.
Yeah, that would have, I'm sure, turned out very poorly.
Oh.
Yeah, more interesting information about 38 Studios to throw in here, too, because this is just fascinating to me. So THQ Nordic is the company that did the remaster. I actually quite like THQ Nordic. They produced tons of really cool games. They apparently wound up with the assets for Kingdoms of Amalur from an auction from Rhode Island to recover the money lost by 38 Studios. Which is just such an insane way of ending up with this.
Well, and I'm trying to remember, and like we had mentioned, What Happened has a great episode on this game, but there was so much money that just went down the drain during development, which is why they were in such.
So they hired
deep
like a big
shit
name
with Rhode
author
Island.
and a bunch of stuff like that. Yeah. Very strange. Again, I heavily recommend checking out Kingdoms of Amalur. If you like those like action RPGs like that, I think you'll have a great time. Kingdoms of Amalur is a very fun game, but it's fascinating to look at like why it quote unquote failed. Even though Kingdoms of Amalur itself, I think, actually had a pretty good amount of commercial success. It was just like there was no way they were ever making back the money that they had drained from Rhode Island. Which is such a crazy scenario. So I also think there's one more list of games, and this kind of fits into the category that Wyatt had mentioned of almost developer shame. So Let me make sure I got the
Developer shame.
the name of this game correct. A good example before I get to the one that I actually want to talk about is The Day Before. Just coming out and being an absolute like dumpster fire of a game that was clearly made to like grift money from people and then got delisted. I think I still have this in my Steam library. It was dirt cheap.
Oh my god, how have I not mentioned Infinity Blade more when we're talking about game press?
That's an excellent question that extends to all three of us.
Yeah,
God,
Infinity Blade's a great example. Although Infinity Blade is definitely in the territory of just like the technology moved on and they couldn't upkeep it, which is a hard one to talk about because they were Apple-produced games and Apple's notorious about how close to the chest they are with all their tech development and whatnot. And like that, Infinity Blade is an Epic Games thing, and they're actively feuding with Apple right now over all this stuff. So.
Well, wasn't part of it too, like there was like an issue with Infinity Blade when iOS went to like a 64-bit based operating system, and Infinity Blade was still
something
like,
along those lines. Yeah,
Infinity
32.
Blade basically required a 32-bit system in order to run properly, but because of the feud with Apple and Epic, we're not going to get ports. We're not going to get any like re-releases or anything.
Okay,
which didn't that come to an end at least to some amount, because Fortnite is coming back onto the iOS store.
Yeah, that's true. We're not getting Infinity Blade. It's not happening. Don't give me that hope.
It still could happen, Wyatt. It can still happen.
Alex, you're sick.
You're sick when you need help. My belief in that. So this is a game that I'm curious if anyone else has heard of this at all, or if it's just me. So actually, yeah, I think this has involved me. This is the same dude. I think it is the same dude that was involved The Day Before. Well before The Day Before, there was a game called Infestation Survivor Stories. Before that, it was called The War Z.
God, yes, I remember this. Yes. Oh my God.
And it's such a fascinating one because this was, to me, the first like really big scam game. Which I have played this. I have 4 hours on my Steam account of this game.
Why would you do this to yourself?
Because at the time, I was a dumb little child that liked zombie games. The weird thing, so Infestation Survivor Stories is still getting development.
Yeah, well, it's got a whole other name now. It's called Infestation: The New Beginning.
Which I don't know when that happened.
Bad attempt at rebranding.
Yeah, it's definitely a really interesting old game for this. It was one of the first big high-profile failures. I love the AI-generated content disclosure on the Steam page. The developers describe their AI use as this: we are only using AI for generating cool images.
Oh my god.
Which is, I think, the funniest thing you could possibly put there. Yeah, it's very fascinating.
Also, while we're picking apart their Steam page, if you scroll down a little bit further, mature content description. The developers describe the content like this. It's a PvP-based survival game. You will meet other players in-game, fight, and kill for loot. It's all fantasy and not real. Don't worry, guys. None of the killing that you do in this video game is real. Don't worry about it.
And I love that there are
which is hilarious because
game
before
this
this
month. There's reviews from yesterday.
No.
People are still buying this game.
What do they think about it, Ryan?
Maybe a case for things that should be. Oh, it's free to play though. It's free to play now, so I don't need to.
What do they think about this game,
Oh
Ryan?
my god, this is going to be a future punishment. I can feel it in my bones.
I don't know. I don't necessarily trust that this isn't going to be full of hackers in a way that would make it unsafe to play. Yeah, Infestation Survivor Stories, and particularly the War Z way back in the day, I think very interesting games to think out of, or to look at in terms of complete and utter failures. Impossible grifting? Who knows? It's hard to tell. But yeah, that's we're pretty far off from our original topic here, but this is definitely, I think, in that same territory of games
Key
that are
features.
just like maybe
A
not worth
new
playing.
map. Key features: a new map the size of Colorado called Oregon. What? What?
I love it so much.
What? Oh my god!
New U.S.
Okay,
patch
I'm
notes
done.
just dropped.
I'm done now. I'm done.
You done? You good?
Move on.
But yeah, I think we hit most of our stuff here. Talking about a lot of games that have had their day in the sun gone. There's a lot more canceled things we can talk about at some point.
May I end on a high note?
Absolutely.
Not a high note, but like a positive note. So we talked about stop killing games, which if you're in the EU, please sign, because I think it's overall a very, very good initiative. But as sort of like a mini shout out, but it is very related to our topic. Has anyone here heard of the Video Game History Foundation?
Yes.
So these guys have probably the most extensive video game library, and they do so much more than just store games, right? Like they'll take any physical based media and they have a gigantic library, but they're also trying to gather any source code that they can from developers, design notes, all of these things, and it's like so much more in depth than like a standard video game library, which is great. And they're also trying to do a lot of outreach in the sense of there's little pop up like museums and shows and stuff like that. They're like really trying to educate people on why all of this is so important, which I think is so cool. They're also trying to reach out to like politicians, legislators, whoever, which is just they do such great work.
Yeah.
It's genuinely really, really cool to see stuff. Like I said, like not even just like, they have a library with they have like a giant collection, but like source code preservation, which is just so much further than I think you see a lot of groups like this go. It's just so cool. Asset libraries as well.
It's great to see.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, with that, let's move into actually shoutouts. I can go first because it's in theme with what you just said, which I'm going to give. I'm actually lumping on with Alex in one, but I want to shout out this other thing that I thought about while you were saying that. Rochester Institute of Play, or not Institute, Rochester Museum of Play, is one of the few museums in the U.S. that has a huge dedication to video games and video game history. So there's a strong museum of play and a bunch of other things like it that try to keep all this information alive and available, and they often have things you can go interact with. It's a really cool way to see the history of video games in a more full way. Also, events like the Portland Retro Games Expo is a big one on the West Coast that has lots of retro games stuff. Shout out specifically to, this is going to get hyper specific, but it's in the same territory of Pink Gorilla Games up in Seattle, which is run and owned at least partly by Kelsey Lewin, who is a min-max cohort YouTuber, but also a very big person in games preservation and retro gaming. And just a lot of these people trying to keep games alive in a more long-term fashion. It was great to see.
Nice.
Well, I couldn't figure out. I was deciding between two shout outs for me, so I'm just going to do both quickly.
Great. Yeah, perfect.
One of them, for this was actually more for Father's Day. But I took my dad out in Burlington. We had a great day during Father's Day, and I got him a gift last second because I just saw it while we were walking around. It was a poster of cameras, because we both love photography, of cameras throughout history. Basically, they had tons of different kinds of cameras and all that stuff, and it was really cool. But at the same store, they had a very similar poster, but for video game controllers.
Ooh.
Awesome.
And so they have, starting all the way from the Magnavox Odyssey in 1972 all the way
Wow.
up to Xbox Series, XS and PlayStation. And I really loved getting this because this was a few days after the Switch 2 came out, so this is already obsolete because it's already missing the Switch controller.
Is that an accessibility controller? The third from the
Yeah.
last one?
Yeah, they have
Oh.
the adaptive controller. I played a fun game of like what controllers on here do I not recognize whatsoever, or at least from like the system that it's from that I don't recognize.
What's that one
And
with the really big handles above the N64 one?
This one?
Left
That's the
2 and down
N64
1.
one.
Oh, never mind. Then 2 over from it to the left.
Oh, here? Oh, that's the Virtual Boy controller, baby.
That's the Virtual Boy
yeah.
controller?
That's the good shit.
Oh
baby.
my god.
But the only ones
That thing's got handles.
Oh, it's great. The only ones I didn't recognize on here, I don't know what a Heathkit GD1380 is. Never fucking heard of that in my life. That sounds like a British a computer.
Yeah,
from back
that's
in the day or
definitely a
something.
supercomputer and not a controller.
I've also never heard of the Epic Super Cassette Vision because there was a time in history where you could buy video games on cassette tapes.
Wow.
Which is pretty crazy. But for the most part, I think I've heard of most of these. The Commodore
the crazy Intellivision, ColecoVision numpad controller with the
ColecoVision.
joystick nub.
Insano style Amiga controller. Here, let me zoom
Oh.
in. Where the fuck is it?
Yeah, there
Look
we
at
go.
that fucking beauty right there.
Great.
God damn.
Phenomenal.
But they even have like the Bandai Apple Pippin.
Wow. The Apple Pippin!
Which is fucking wild. Like,
oh my god.
They definitely
Pippin
did their homework, which is really
They
cool
found
to
some
see.
controller deep lore with that one.
Yeah, I like
Wow.
it. Vectrex, Coleco. Yeah, this I actually
that's good.
I haven't even figured out where to put it in my apartment yet. I'm so excited. But the second shout out that I wanted to do, this one's a little bit less important because I think anyone watching this is already gonna know. I saw Superman on Friday, and it was a fucking blast. Not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I had the biggest stupid grin on my face during most of the movie because I was having just such a nice time. It was so much fun.
Nice.
A bit a bit scatterbrained, and it goes at an absolutely fucking buck wild, insane pace. It was really, really fun, and I really enjoyed it.
Very good.
Wow, James Gunn makes a good superhero movie. And in other news, grass is green.
Alex, it's you.
Can I? K-pop Demon Hunters. Okay. Oh god, K-pop Demon Hunters. Fantastic movie.
I can echo this. I've seen it 3 times.
I've been hearing.
I've seen it twice now, but I also haven't done karaoke of it.
Hey Wyatt, if you want to watch it, we're down.
I'm down to have a third time.
Yeah,
I
I just want to put
So
the
good.
image into people's
heard
minds
about
of a bunch of veteran Diablo developers sitting in a very small karaoke lounge, screaming every single song of K-pop Demon Hunters.
Just incredibly good music that has topped the charts higher than most that I think.
It has
most, if not
shattered
all,
every
K-pop
K-pop
music.
record.
Absolutely
Actually
wild.
shattered them.
Wonderful
truly
art
crazy.
style. Same studio, I think you said, as the one that did Mitchell's and the Machines. Was that?
Yeah, and Spider-Verse. That's probably the one most people know.
Oh my god!
Really? It's Sony Animation. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably not all the same
I
people
enjoy
because
that
I think
style.
Sony Animation works on more than one thing at a time. But
Yeah.
it is that group who has been on an absolute knockout run since Spider-Verse 1.
Nice, like, good story too, and a decent length of a movie.
Yeah. Enough that it leaves you
my
wanting
God.
more but doesn't feel unfinished, which I think is the perfect spot. And hey, here's hoping we get a sequel because it's been absolutely banging off the charts in every single thing. Honestly, it probably had an uphill battle because the name K-pop Demon Hunters does not instill confidence.
It's a lot to chew on.
Maybe that's part of the advertising, but yeah, it definitely.
Is it just for some reason, whenever I hear the title K-pop Demon Hunters, I think of a gacha game. I don't know why, but that's just what it makes me think.
It totally could be.
And that's not really anything against the movie. I haven't seen it. I don't really know what it is.
Reminds
but
me, we're gonna have an episode now of Wyatt playing the horse racing, the horse girl racing gacha.
Oh,
game.
you mean the one run by the Yakuza?
Yeah, Uma Musume. I keep seeing pop up everywhere, and I'm like, I feel like Wyatt needs to do a stream of this at some point.
Wyatt. There's a horse girl gacha that has ties to the Yakuza.
Properly. Hold on.
But the thing with the horse girl gacha is that it's not like they don't look like horses. They're just there's a horse girl gacha, Wyatt, but they don't look like horses. Like all they have is the ears and a tail. So it's just women
and the fact
running
that they run on
full
a track.
sprint like the style of a horse race.
Close the show.
But it's
close the show. We're done. We're talking about horse girl gacha games. We're talking about horse girl gacha games. I think this podcast has gotten away from me a little bit.
Talking about abandonware, that's definitely gonna fall into that list eventually. I think. I don't know, maybe not. It's actually, I think, been doing tremendously well because of the sheer amount of social media stuff it's been getting.
Ryan, you're underestimating the horse girl community.
I am. I'm truly
not only horse girls, but hardcore, but salarymen into hardcore gambling.
Well, see, the better thing too is I learned all the horse girls in that game, or at least the majority of them, are based off of actual Japanese racehorses. So they're named after Japanese racehorses, including one that has never won a race. The game is like the worst.
She's cheering, like standing in a pose like this after she gets 9th place.
Ryan, when it comes to that community, they don't horse around. All right.
I'm so tempted to just hit the end episode button without doing that.
Wyatt,
on that note, we're gonna leave you with go watch K-pop Demon Hunters.
I gotta say nay.
But not to K-pop Demon Hunters. Go watch that. It's very good.
Would you say that it behooves you to watch K-pop Demon Hunters?
I would say it behooves you to watch.